Welcome to History as Old. Today we journey through the epic saga of the Soviet superpower, its birth, its tremendous rise, its global rivalry, and its dramatic collapse. From the ruins of Imperial Russia to the formation of the Soviet state, the tension of the Cold War, the reforms, the unraveling of the Union, and the birth of the Russian Federation. We will examine the political, economic, ideological, and national forces that shaped one of the 20th century's most momentous stories. This is not just history, it is a mirror of power, ambition, ideology, and human consequence. Prepare for vivid scenes, insightful commentary, and cinematic visuals as we trace the story of a superpower that changed the world and then faded into a new era. In 1917, the centuries-old rule of the Romanov dynasty in Russia was swept away by revolution. The Vladimir Lenin-led Bolsheviks seized power in Petrograd, signaling the end of Imperial Russia and the beginning of a new socialist state. In 1922, the union of several Soviet republics formed the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, stretching across Eurasia, embracing diverse nationalities, bound by communist ideology and centralized control. This new superpower in the making aimed to transform an agrarian empire into an industrial juggernaut and champion of world revolution. The foundations would be laid in struggle and sacrifice, ambition and repression. As the Soviet state consolidated its rule and set its sights on becoming a global force. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, the Soviet state under Joseph Stalin embarked on rapid industrialization, collectivized agriculture, and brutal political purges. The Soviet Union transformed from a peasant society to a militarized industrial power, but at a staggering human cost. Millions perished or suffered in forced labor camps, while the regime built vast factories, heavy industry, and a modern Red Army. By the outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR had become one of the world's strongest powers. And after the war, emerged as one of two global superpowers. Yet the internal contradictions of terror, control, and societal strain would sow seeds of future crisis. The Soviet Union's greatest test came in World War II when Nazi Germany invaded in 1941. The Red Army held firm, endured the siege of Leningrad, the Battle of Stalingrad, and pushed westward to Berlin by 1945. The victory elevated the USSR's status as a global power and allowed it to extend its influence across Eastern Europe, creating a buffer zone of Allied socialist states. The Cold War was born out of this outcome. The United States and the USSR found themselves locked in ideological, political, and military rivalry. The Soviet Union now stood as a superpower, industrial, nuclear-armed, global in ambition. From the late 1940s, the USSR tightened its control over Eastern Europe, establishing satellite states bound by the Warsaw Pact and Soviet ideology. The world was divided by the Iron Curtain. The rivalry with the West played out not just in nuclear arms races and espionage, but in proxy wars, competition in space and technology, and ideological struggle. The The Soviet economy responded with heavy investment in military and industry, often at the cost of consumer goods and living standards. While externally potent, internal strains were mounting: inefficiency, stagnation, and a system increasingly out of touch with the needs and aspirations of its population. By the 1970s and 1980s, the Soviet economy had begun to stagnate. Command planning produced heavy industry, but neglected consumer needs, leading to shortages, long queues, and declining living standards. Oil export revenue, once a backbone of Soviet financing, was vulnerable to global price shifts. The political system resisted reform, and the elite grew disconnected from ordinary citizens. Around the same time, internal dissent, nationalist sentiment, and calls for reform began to grow across the republics. The Soviet superpower facade hid deep structural weakness. As historians note, a bankrupt ideology, economic malaise, and social discontent combined to weaken the Union's cohesion. In March 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became General Secretary of the Communist Party, inheriting a faltering economy and a rigid political system. He introduced the twin policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, intending to revitalize the USSR. Glasnost opened public discourse, allowed media criticism, and greater transparency. Perestroika aimed to inject limited market mechanisms and decentralize planning. These reforms sparked hope, both within the Soviet Union and abroad. Yet they also loosened the party's grip on society, emboldened nationalist and democratic forces, and inadvertently unleashed forces the regime could not fully control. The Soviet superpower embarked on a risky experiment in transformation. Gorbachev's decision to withdraw support from maintaining strict Soviet control over Eastern Europe had immense consequences. In 1989, the Iron Curtain effectively cracked as socialist governments in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and elsewhere collapsed peacefully or semi-peacefully. The fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 symbolized the unraveling of Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe. With Moscow refraining from military intervention, Republican and nationalist movements gained momentum. The USSR's influence outside its borders was shrinking, and inside its borders the message was clear: if satellites could break free, so could the republics within. As the 1990s approached, republics within the Soviet Union itself began to assert their autonomy. Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, pressed for independence. Nationalist movements in Ukraine, Georgia, and elsewhere gathered pace. The Central Soviet Authority found itself challenged by demands for sovereignty, cultural revival, and democratic rights. The reforms under Gorbachev had weakened the party's control and allowed Republican elites to mobilize support. The Union that once seemed immutable now faced centrifugal forces from within, ethnic, regional, and political, that would soon tear it apart. In August 1991, hardline members of the Soviet establishment attempted a coup against Gorbachev, seeking to reverse his reforms and preserve the Union. The putsch failed when popular resistance exploded, led in part by Boris Yeltsin atop a tank in Moscow. The coup shattered the legitimacy of the Communist Party, accelerated the unraveling of the Union, and empowered Republican leaders. Gorbachev's authority was deeply weakened. The endgame for the Soviet superpower was now in motion. This dramatic moment shifted power decisively away from Moscow's old guard to emergent national leaders across the republics. In the aftermath of the coup, the speed of change became overwhelming. Republic after republic declared independence from the Union. On 24 August 1991, Ukraine signaled its separation. By December, 10 of the 15 republics had seceded. The Central Soviet apparatus lost control. In a bold move, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine and Belarus met and declared the dissolution of the USSR, forming the Commonwealth of Independent States CIS instead. The idea of one superpower union was no more. The breakup was dramatic, irreversible, and historic. On 25 December 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president of the Soviet Union. The hammer and sickle flag was lowered over the Kremlin for the last time. The Soviet Union formally ceased to exist. The Union of Republics that had for decades been one of the two global superpowers dissolved into 15 independent nations. It was a peaceful end in many respects, but also the culmination of decades of internal decay, external pressure, and reform failures. With its demise, the Cold War era concluded and a new world order emerged. The fall of the Soviet superpower was not sudden, but the result of accumulated pressure. Economic stagnation, ideological exhaustion, mounting defense burdens, and shrinking legitimacy. Oil prices plunged, and the export revenues that sustained the regime collapsed. Gorbachev's reforms, while ambitious, destabilized the system without replacing it. Public expectations erupted into demands for freedoms the state could not accommodate. Nationalism exploded within the Union's republics. As one historian put it, the Soviet Union fell victim to a perfect storm and a hapless captain. The collapse of the Soviet superpower dramatically altered world geopolitics. The bipolar order ended, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization expanded eastward, former satellites pursued new alliances, and the United States emerged as the sole superpower. The rise of new states brought ethnic conflict, economic turmoil, and realignment. Former Soviet republics faced questions of identity, governance, and sovereignty. The dissolution reshaped Europe and Asia, creating security vacuum zones, prompting NATO's transformation and heralding the globalized era of the 1990s. With the Soviet Union gone, the Russian Federation emerged under President Boris Yeltsin. Russia inherited the nuclear arsenal, the seat at the United Nations, and the legacy of superpower status, but also the burden of transition. The economy collapsed, social safety nets vanished, crime and corruption flourished, and the state struggled to reform. The shift from command economy to market-oriented capitalism was chaotic and painful. For many Russians, the loss of superpower prestige was a deep psychological shock. Russia's post-Soviet era would define much of its modern politics, identity, and unrest. The legacy of the Soviet superpower is complex. On one hand, the USSR achieved industrialization, defeated Nazi Germany, launched the first human into space, and created a vast social infrastructure. On the other hand, it inflicted enormous suffering, suppressed dissent, perpetuated economic inefficiency, and failed to adapt. The symbolic end of the Soviet era reminds us that even the mightiest powers can collapse if they neglect internal vitality and adaptiveness. For historians, the story of the Soviet Union is a cautionary tale of power, ambition, and systemic fragility in the face of change. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it wasn't only states that changed, it was people's lives. Millions faced unemployment, poverty, health crises, and identity confusion. Former Soviet citizens had to adjust to new borders, currencies, political systems, and economic realities. The shock of transition was severe. Life expectancy dropped in Russia, organized crime surged, and social safety nets disappeared. The border shifts and new nationalities triggered conflicts in the Caucasus, Central Asia, and the Baltic region. The fall of the superpower thus carried deep human cost, alongside geopolitical change. Post-1991, Russia faced the question, what comes after the superpower? The country grappled with its Soviet past, Western influence, rising nationalism, and authoritarian drift. Under later leaders, the idea of restoring Russia's greatness became central. The memory of the Soviet superpower, the trauma of collapse, and the need for stability shaped foreign and domestic politics. Russia's course diverged from the 1990s liberal experiment toward consolidation of power, reassertion of influence, and a new national narrative. The echo of Soviet power still reverberates in Russia's actions and identity. The story of the Soviet superpower offers vital lessons for any system of power. Centralized control may forge strength, but neglects flexibility. Military might alone cannot sustain legitimacy if citizens lack voice, prosperity, and hope. Ideological rigidity and economic inefficiency can undermine even the largest states. Reform needs more than words. It needs institutions that deliver. Nationalities and identities matter. External dominance may collapse from internal weakness. For students of history, Politics and Governance: The Soviet Saga is a textbook in rise and fall. Power built on foundations that didn't evolve collapsed under their own weight. With the Soviet superpower gone, the global order shifted. A unipolar world emerged briefly, then multipolar patterns began to form. Russia remains a major actor, inheritor of Soviet legacy, with nuclear arsenals, strategic ambition, and a unique regional role. At the same time, former Soviet republics continue their own journeys, joining the European Union, forging national identities or slipping into conflict. The collapse of the Soviet superpower didn't end its influence, it transformed it. Understanding today's geopolitics, Ukraine crisis, Russia-West tensions, energy politics, and nationalism requires grasping the Soviet story. The echoes of the past still speak. As we conclude the tale of the Soviet superpower, remember, great powers can rise, dominate, then fade, but their legacies persist. The Soviet Union's fall reshaped borders, ideologies, and lives. It taught us about ambition, reform, nationalism, ideology, and economic reality. For Russia, the journey continues. For the world, the lessons are enduring. On Echoes of the Past, we leave you with the image of transformation, from the might of a superpower to the uncertain dawn of new nations. May we heed the past so we may better shape the future.